Hello and welcome to How to Homeschool in High School, the podcast focused on encouraging and equipping you to homeschool through high school, hosted by a high school teen. My name is Nadine Lawford, and on today's episode, number 35, we get the honor and privilege of hearing from Mr. Andrew Pudewa. So most of you are very familiar with the name Mr. Andrew Pudewa because he is the founder and director of Institute for Excellence in Writing, or more commonly known, I think, in the homeschooling world as IEW. And IEW is a writing curriculum that has been a staple in our homeschool curriculum lineup since day one, and that was 8 years ago. So we've been using IEW for a very long time, and it's had such an impact, not only in the way we learned how to write, but also in the importance of learning how to think well and how to present our ideas well. And it's been one of the greatest blessings that we have discovered through homeschooling, but not only just the curriculum, but Mr. Pudewa's talks at multiple conventions have really changed the way we view school and education and challenged us and encouraged us to continue. And this very podcast, as many of you know, would not exist had it not been for the influence of Mr. Pudewa. So a few weeks ago, I did reach out to him and told him pretty much that, how much of an impact he's had on my life and my family and this podcast. So he very generously offered to be interviewed on the podcast, and that is what I get the honor of sharing with you guys today, our conversation. And we cover so many different things. It was actually an hour long, so I decided to split it up into 2 weeks, spread out the wealth a little bit. So this is just part one of this interview. And we talk about the history of IEW and also the importance of writing in high school, why we need it, how to instill value into writing, and also cover some curriculums that IEW has specifically for high school students. So this is a great interview. Let's just go ahead and jump right in. Thank you so much for doing this today. You've really inspired me and my family in numerous ways, not just in writing, but also in life. So this is like a dream come true to talk to you today. I think pretty much started this podcast because of your talks and time I listened to you at the convention. So it's really made a difference. Thank you so much.
Well, you're very sweet, and I'm always very excited to know that any little seeds I may have attempted to plant have somehow wiggled their way into fertile soil. And I've really enjoyed various episodes on your podcast. You have a great style, and you've had some really interesting people to talk to. So you're doing a great job, and we need more people like you to be putting out goodness into the world.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot to me. I just saw that there wasn't a lot of content specifically for high school homeschoolers, and I just thought I would enjoy something like this. So because of a lot of what you were talking about with your hacking high school and just thinking about different ways we can do it, inspiring other teenagers to try different things, to approach high school differently. That's something that has really helped me in my homeschool. So that's kind of what I hope to talk about more on the podcast. And so this is I get to hear from you, from the person who kind of started it. So I always ask the same question whenever I begin an interview. How did you first get started in the homeschooling community? Was it IEW first, or was it homeschooling first?
It was homeschooling first, and it was a very, very, very long time ago. My wife and I, in about 1990, had children who were 10, 8, 3, and a newborn. And the two older girls had been in a kind of a little cottage school. It was kind of like, somebody homeschooling a dozen kids in their own home, and it was a great situation. But that kind of ended. And so we're looking at the options. We could not possibly afford a private school. I didn't want her to have to go to work just to be able to pay tuition on a private school. She had a degree in education. I had background in teaching music. And so we had a home business. So it just made a lot of sense to say, well, let's do this homeschooling thing. We didn't have a lot of friends. Actually, we knew almost no one who was homeschooling. We're living in Bozeman, Montana. It's a pretty small town in a pretty small state. And so that was really, we're not quite in the pioneer level of those who did it when it was still illegal in the 70s. but we're on the early part of
Mhm.
the curve.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've heard a lot of stories of people who started homeschooling in that early era, and it's really, you know, they are the pioneers that have gotten us to where we are. But right now we have so many resources that just keep coming, and I'm always so grateful for all of them. But I know that wasn't always the case at the beginning. So how did you first start IEW?
Yeah, so I was, as I said, teaching music. I was
Mm.
teaching Suzuki violin and kinder music, and I had worked for a small school for a couple years in Montana. And there was a Canadian there who said we should go to Canada and learn this thing called the Blended Soundside Program of Learning. So we did, and part of what they taught in this 11-day teacher training course in Canada was the structure and style in composition course with Dr. Webster, my mentor. And so I came back and I taught in the school for a year. Then we moved to a different city, didn't work for that school anymore. And I started a little writing class for my two oldest girls and some of their friends who were homeschooling. And that went really well. I enjoyed it tremendously. The girls liked it. And the next summer came around, I thought, well, I'm going to go back and take this summer course again because I think there's more to learn there. I had a lot of questions, and
Mm.
so I went back the next year and took that same course again. Got to be a little bit friendlier with Dr. Webster. Came back, expanded a little bit, and went up a third year. And they said, well, if you're going to keep coming up here, you might as well join our team and help us teach this thing.
Mm.
So I became a staff member of the Blended Soundsite crew, and then I took a couple of years off from teaching. I started a different kind of business in customer service training. I didn't like it very well. And in 95, I went back to teaching music, but I also got an idea to combine kind of the idea of doing seminars with this writing program that I had learned. And I thought, I could probably teach this thing to other people. So I made up a flyer. I made up a little company name, Institute for Excellence in Writing. I don't know, it's a mouthful, but that's what I thought of.
Mhm.
Sent some flyers to a homeschool group in Seattle and got 20 people to pay $40 to listen to me talk for one day. And I thought, this has potential because that was about as much as I could make an entire week of teaching violin as hard as I could.
Mm.
So in '95, I started doing maybe once a month, twice a month, traveling to different cities, doing the teaching writing structure and style seminar. And after a couple of years, I added to it some student workshops to be like a demonstration class. And then someone came to me and said, we should make a video of this. My initial reaction was, that's the dumbest idea I ever heard. Who would ever watch such a boring video? It's a class. You have to be in a room. You have to
Mhm.
look at people in the eye. You have to see if they smile or laugh or frown at what you say. But I did it, and I thought, well, worst case scenario, I can watch myself and try to improve a little bit. And he said, I won't charge you anything. We'll just make the video and then we'll try to sell it. And if we sell it, we'll both make some money. If we don't, nothing lost. It was horrible, Nadine. It was so dreadful. I had never tried to make a video
Mhm.
before. The equipment was bad. The lighting was awful. I kept walking off the screen because I didn't know what it was like to like stay in one place. And
Mhm.
and I had driven all night to get there, so I looked like a goon. And I said, we are not going to sell this. We are absolutely not going to sell it. However, I will try again. So we scheduled another chance. I put tape on the floor so I wouldn't walk off the camera. Um, and we started selling that about 97, 98. Old VHS tapes. You're probably not old enough to remember those kinds of things, but we did that. And in 99, I was actually I was making more money by traveling around doing seminars, classes for kids, and selling videotapes than I was teaching music. So I thought, okay, this has the potential to support the family. We ended up wanting to move to California to be closer to grandparents on both sides. And so it was in 99, I went full time, got our first employee in 2001. And from there, it's just been growth. 2003, it was like everybody got a DVD player for
Mm.
Christmas. So we switched over from VHS to DVD, which actually improved the cost of goods on the stuff we were selling, a lot because DVDs are so much cheaper. And I never in my life imagined that, you know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids would be watching me on video and learning, keyword outlines and dress up checklists and topic clincher paragraphs and all that stuff. But I would very much attribute every aspect of whatever success we've had to the grace of God, God's help and sponsorship all along, every step of the way. My mentors along the way. I'm not smart enough to have actually done something like this myself. So it's really been a team of people and supernatural assistance. And all I can really do is say, I thank God and I hope that we will be able to continue to serve homeschooling families for as long as we can.
I love that story. And with the verse video, I have such a hard time listening to my early podcast episodes. They're like, because I didn't know like the technology fully. I didn't really know how to communicate my ideas in the way I wanted to. And it's just like nails down a chalkboard whenever I watch it. So I understand a bit of that. But yeah, it's amazing to watch it grow and how much of an impact it's had. And I love whenever, because we used IEW the first year we homeschooled, and it's been the curriculum we've used, I think, every year. One of the only, I think.
And so that'd
And
be at least what, 12 years? How old are you now?
yeah, I'm 18 right now. So we actually were public schooled. I was public schooled until fourth grade when my mom pulled me from school. So ever since then, like, I think 2016 ish.
So eight, nine
Yeah,
years ish. Yeah.
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 And so we've just shared it with all our families and all our homeschooling community. And it's just so fun to watch, like, my cousins who are, I don't know, 8, right? I think 8 and younger are now like starting structure and style. And it's just so fun to see like the next generation doing it. I don't know. But yeah, IW has been such an amazing part of our homeschooling and our homeschool community's curriculum for years. So yeah, it's really made an impact. But I wanted to know, you just released a new curriculum called University Ready Writing for high school students. And I was wondering if you could talk on that for a minute.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to. So I guess, one thing that I have heard too many times to have counted, I mean, hundreds, maybe thousands, I don't know, is adults who came to our, seminars, workshops, learned the writing program and said, I wish I had had this when I was in high school. I
Mm,
wish I had had this when I was in college. My life would have been so much better. And so, I've always known that there is, a potential for, reaching adults and providing them with kind of the Cliff Notes version of what we teach. I don't think it's the best way. I think the best way is to learn it when you're young and grow up doing it, and then it just becomes like second nature. But there's still that benefit you can get by learning it when you're older and having a reason to apply. So what we did was we said, okay, if we create a 12-week course, we'll have 12 2-hour classes. How much of what we have and know and have done in longer, courses can we squeeze in there and then tailor it specifically for someone who's going to go off and have to write for college or university professors or teachers? And so that's what we did. We said, okay, what are the key things that would be most valuable for everyone to be able to take into that environment? Obviously, working with outlines is critical because it helps you separate the complexity of what to write and then the writing of it. Obviously, working with checklists, although we did use a modified checklist because we thought of all these stylistic techniques, what are the ones that are going to make the biggest difference in academic writing? And so rather than starting with dress ups, which is what you probably did, we just put in the sentence openers because that adds the variety of sentence pattern that makes the biggest difference in a kind of subconscious evaluation of style, if you will.
mm,
Um, Another thing that we put in was the importance of being able to summarize and to write what is called a précis, which is kind of a fancy word for a summary, but it's you have too much information and you have to extract from that what's interesting, important, relevant, useful, meaningful. Being able to, summarize or write a précis that has enough to be useful, but not so much to be cluttered. And so that skill we've built right in. Of course, we address the bothersome stuff like MLA and APA and formatting your papers and citations. But I always, whenever I teach that, I always say this is the way it is now, but it changes. The MLA, they publish a new handbook every year or two or three. So the important thing isn't to remember how to do exactly this. The important thing is to learn how to follow the guidelines precisely. Mm. One of the things I was most excited about was our advanced note-taking system. Mm-hmm. Kind of like a keyword outline on steroids, where you are reading or listening to live lectures, hearing an idea, putting keywords rather than trying to write whole phrases, clauses, or sentences, but then organizing those in a geographic manner, almost like a map on the paper, so you can connect up ideas so much more efficiently. And if there's one thing that would be worth the cost of that entire course, it would be the advanced note-taking system. And then I did sneak in a little bit of author imitation so that the students could get the idea of how to imitate someone's writing style. Well, why would that be useful? Well, if you go off to college or university and you've got your writing papers for 2 or 3 different teachers, well, these teachers are going to have a different style, a different kind of the type of writing they like. How can you figure that out? Well, best way is to read something they wrote, make a little checklist so you can sound like they sounded, and then write a paper that kind of imitates their style. They won't know you did it. It's a stealth method of kind of how to spy on your professor and figure out his or her writing style so that you can get a better grade on every paper. So that's a kind of an overview. We also went over some of the longer essay models. I don't know if you ever bumped into our super essay model, which is 12 to 16 paragraphs, or even the super duper essay model, which could go longer, in case you happen to have to write something, too long. Though the average university assignment is 3 to 5 pages. So,
yeah, for sure. My mom was listening to your episode on your podcast about university ready writing, and she ordered it right away. So it is on its way coming to our house. But I took Writing 101 at a local college last semester as my junior year. And so much of what IEW had taught was so useful in that class. Even, without, I know, probably taking the university ready writing would be even more of an advantage, but I found that it was hard for students to analyze what quotes or whatever sources they were reading. My teacher had to stress this over and over again, was I don't want to just know the facts. I want to actually hear what you have to say about them. So I know that you talked about the triac model in that episode as well, but kind of the analyze part of the information that you're presenting. So IW was amazing in that class. I don't know what I would have done without it.
Yeah, we also taught an idea we nicknamed DCAS, DCAS. Mm-hmm. And as a mnemonic, I thought DC at sunset, because you could imagine that. But this was kind of loosely based on the common topics, all the way derived back from Aristotle. So you work with division, comparison, analysis, and synthesis. And the questions that would go with those things, that's really the skill, isn't it, of being able to analyze, is being able to ask good questions about the ideas you're dealing with. And I think so many students, they just don't really learn that in high school.
Yeah, exactly. It's the making your own opinions off of what people are actually kind of making and summarizing what the idea they're trying to present you with in the work of whatever.
So did you get an A on every paper you wrote in that class?
Yeah. On the last paper, she said, I don't have anything to add to this. So I was like, that is IEW. I should write something and say this is like do IW all your years because of this. I don't make writing 101 very easy. So,
Well,
yeah.
we're hoping that we can find some kind of interested university level teachers out
Mm,
there that maybe they're teaching a subject that isn't English or composition, but they would like their kids to be able to write better papers.
mhm,
Maybe they would then say, hey, for whatever it is, hundred something dollars, I don't even know, you could give yourself like this secret weapon to write papers better
mhm,
for my class and all your other classes. So here's a link, go do it. So
mhm.
I hope and believe we will get traction outside the homeschool community, outside the kind of traditional teacher community that we're dealing with, and into the adult community, and hopefully some college professors. In fact, if you happen to know any college teachers that would be interested and
Mhm.
actually give it a look, we'll send a review copy out, no cost.
Yeah, I'll definitely. I'm planning on going to college next year, so I definitely keep that for sure. My mom majored in writing and communications in college, and whenever she started homeschooling us and she started doing IW, she felt like for the first time she actually learned how to write. And I remember her just talking about that, being talking to my dad, like, I can't believe I went through college and I didn't like really know how to write, and I feel like I'm finally learning. So that was one thing that she and my dad's been asking us to teach him how to write for different things, and he'll have us go over his emails that he sends for work. Sometimes he'll come up and say, hey, you guys, you write really well, can you look over this? So I just thought that was always so funny when he does that, but it's
I
cool.
I talked to a girl in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
This was years ago, but at the time she was, I think, 16, 17, and she had volunteered for a political campaign
Mm-hmm.
for state representative in Texas.
Wow.
And I guess, it's a small enough campaign that she met him and he liked her. And somehow she got a job basically doing that, proofreading emails that were being sent out for the campaign. She
Wow.
did such a good job that he did get elected, and he hired her to be part of his communication liaison team. So at 17, she's working for a state representative in the government of Texas. I don't know what happened to her after that, but
Mm-hmm.
but she thought, wow, this stuff really is useful and handy.
Yeah. No, I love stories like that so much because it's just something high schoolers normally don't do, and then they get the opportunities to do that. It's pretty amazing.
And I'd throw in one thing too, because yeah, I've talked to a lot of people, usually guys, right? And they're, 13, 14,
Mhm.
maybe 15, and their attitude is, why do I need to learn this stuff? I'm
Mhm.
going to be an engineer, or I'm going to go into the military, or I'm going to code software, or I'm going to be a plumber, or whatever they are thinking they want to do
Mhm.
with their life. First of all, very few people I know ever ended up doing what they imagined they wanted to do when they were 14 or 15. But my response to that is, okay, I get that. But no matter what you do, whether it's engineering or the military or garbage collecting, right?
Mhm.
If you can write and speak well, you'll rise up to leadership in that field,
Mhm.
right? The best engineer remains an engineer because he's a really good engineer. But the good engineer who can communicate engineering ideas well will rise up in organizations in positions of leadership and influence. And so, yeah, you may not think it's part of your career, but if God is calling you to be a person who can positively influence the field you're in and the world you live in, don't neglect communication skills. The
Mhm.
other thing I say to kids is, you don't have to like this. There's no rule says you have to like
Mhm.
writing. I don't like it. You just have to be able to do it decently well.
Yeah. No, I totally understand that because sometimes I get frustrated with subjects if I don't understand the value behind, like for years I was really frustrated with learning math because I really didn't understand what's the value behind algebra. Like, why do I have to do this? And I think through different teachers like explaining me to me the value of learning for math, for example, it's just teaches you how to think logically and to work through hard problems and to get answers in different ways and learn, I think, ultimately just learn more about the way that the world was structured. It's just pretty much the language that the universe is created. Like that's pretty cool to learn how to study that. But for a while, I just didn't understand the value. And so writing as well, like through the years, people have been telling me like this is the real value behind the subjects you're learning, and this is why we spend so much time doing them. And I think often the frustration is just the absence of this. We don't know the value of what we're learning as much. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
your case.
No, absolutely. I often will quote Francis Bacon, who I think had a very pithy and accurate observation. He said, reading makes a full man, speaking makes a ready man, and writing makes an exact man, or woman, obviously. But that idea of, when we read, we furnish our mind with the ideas and the history and the characters and the knowledge and the wisdom of others. Without that, what are we going to have to say that's all that useful to people, right? If we haven't stocked, furnished, equipped ourselves intellectually, then when we have conversation, it's, well, think on your feet, listen well, respond carefully. It's kind of like a quick game, like speed chess or something. You have to figure out what you're going to say and say it pretty darn quick and hope it came out well. But it's in the writing where you really have to say, is this exactly what I am trying to communicate? And is this the best way to communicate what I'm trying to communicate? And so that skill, like math, is going to allow you to apprehend truth in the world and to operate in the world more effectively for your whole life.
I think whenever sometimes I think thoughts and I will write them down and then I'll look at it for a while, like, is that actually how like it made more sense in my brain, but actually having to put words to it, it makes you really think, like, is that actually true or is that the way I want to say it? It's very true. It helps, I feel like it helps clear my mind too, something writing what I'm thinking down. Um, yeah, just organize your thoughts in the way that people can understand what you're trying to say too is also kind of hard sometimes.
I am so curious. You said you're going to go to college next year. I assume you've already got credits under your
Yeah.
belt, so you're going in with a head start. What are you interested in studying in terms of a potential major?
So yeah, I have been dual enrollment students for 3 semesters, I think. So I'm going with, I think, full semester done. But I'm planning on studying physics and math in college. That's
Wow. Awesome. Well, that's good. I wish you the best on that because you'll be able to speak and write and do physics. So, yeah, God bless you.
Oh, thank you. I don't know. The physics department at the college I'm going to is it for me very similar in structure and mindset of my own homeschooling experience. Is very small, it's very close knit, and a lot of independent study. So whenever I really started looking into it, they kind of brought out those characteristics, and I just thought this blends really well into how I've been educated my whole life. I want to continue doing that, and physics is just it's thinking, which I enjoy. But
Yeah.
anyway, but people kept asking me, am I going to study communications or go into podcasting or whatever? Because I'm also very into that. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, but I feel like we should be more well-rounded as, I don't know, scientists, especially. Like we should learn how to communicate and write. And like you said, it would help us advance more. But this kind of compartmentalization of education in different boxes and not really drawing the lines as much. I think that everything's connected. I don't know. I like that quote from Leonardo da Vinci that everything connects to everything else. He was like a brilliant mathematician and also not sorry, brilliant scientist and also a really good artist. So I don't know that those links between the different studies. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, if you think about the term liberal arts, this is a term that almost nobody has a clue what it means or what it did mean or what it could mean. If you were to walk out on the street of any major city and say to some random person, yes, I study the liberal arts, they wouldn't know they'd think it was a, Bernie Sanders appreciation class or, something. Even the people who think they know would say, oh, that's that stuff like philosophy or history. You can't get a job. Okay, well, what are the liberal arts? The classical liberal arts are grammar, logic, rhetoric, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. And why did people study these things? To learn how to think better.
Mm.
They didn't study the liberal arts for a immediate practical application. They studied those liberal arts because those were the things which free people, liberal, liberty, liber, library, they're all cognate words. Those are the things which free people studied so that they would be able to retain their intellectual, spiritual, and hopefully their physical freedoms. So Thomas Jefferson said, a society that hopes to remain free and ignorant is hoping for something that never has and never will be. So this idea of a liberal education is that what you're talking about, I think, is this very broad learning and seeing the integration between the arts and the sciences, between the qualitative arts of language and the quantitative arts of mathematics, and how all of creation and reality are imbued with, the richness of, what I would say all stems from the mind of God. So the more we can learn, the closer we get to an understanding of reality. And so when you said, you're interested in math and physics, I'm thinking, well, that's just beautiful because you pretty much already nailed the language stuff. So now you are going to expand, and I would say, honestly, to any young person out there, don't go and pay a whole lot of money. And even if you get scholarships, don't spend a bunch of time getting some kind of, I don't know, I hate to be critical, but I might call it silly degree in something like communication. What are they going to do? Teach you how to do a podcast and make a PowerPoint and give speeches and write stuff? You could do that all on your own. Be sure that wherever you go to school, you find people that are potential mentors that can really help you learn how to think. And I think you're more likely to find those in a smaller school, perhaps, as you have discovered. And study a serious thing. Get into the meat of something. Mm-hmm. And some of these cutesy modern degrees, I don't see huge amount of benefit from that. Mm-hmm. And especially if you're going to burden yourself with, $50,000-$100,000 of debt, or whatever the average is kids have to spend now.
Yeah, that's definitely something that has been on my heart to talk about more, is just being purposeful and choosing a college major that you can use as more of a tool and less of an experience. Sometimes I see kids rush into college with I want the experience of college instead of, I think that's just the way that our society is kind of right now, and being more intentional in viewing it as a tool and an investment of time and energy and money as well, because it is a lot of that. But when you were talking about the mind of God being kind of with the liberal arts all connected and how you think, I love to just look at, I don't know, anything in nature, like a flower, for example. It's science, but it's also mathematics and it's also art. They're all in one. That's kind of how he's created the universe. So whenever people bring that up, I always point them back to that. That's just how the world works. They're all three of those things.
And then you write poems about flowers, or
yeah, exactly,
foxes, or sunsets, or friendships, and all of that. Then it's and God is the ultimate integration of all things. Mm-hmm. So to the degree we can be integrated in our body, mind, and soul, that we can be integrated in our intellectual pursuits and our relationships and the use of our time. That's the great opportunity. And being young and smart like you and many of your listeners, you're miles and miles ahead of where I was at your age. That's for sure.
Well, thank you. We wouldn't be there without people like you. So thank you for what you're doing. So I could not stop smiling after this interview. I think I smiled for 4 straight hours. I don't know. It was so amazing. He shared so many good things, and I hope you were as encouraged from this interview as I was. And just a big thanks to Mr. Pudewa for taking time out of his day to come and speak on this podcast and share his encouragement and wisdom with us. We couldn't be more grateful for that. So I usually end every episode with a takeaway, with a main takeaway from the episode that I want you guys to walk away with. And I had a very, very hard time doing it this time because I feel like everything he said is a takeaway in and of itself, and it's hard to summarize it. So I'm not going to, actually. I'm going to talk about something related to it and its impact. It's what my family has been talking about over the past week as this interview has come. And it's been the impact that one person can have on so many people's lives. And I know it's a lot, traveling and speaking at conventions and developing curriculums and selling that curriculum. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of energy. But I just like to think that I am just one of thousands of students and families and homeschools who have been challenged and pushed and encouraged to continue. And all of those different impacts have added up together to create this wonderful legacy of encouragement and kindness that is the legacy that Mr. Pudewa has. And I'm so humbled and honored that our little corner of the internet has now joined in a very small part in that legacy. So I know I speak for so many people when I say that I'm so grateful for Mr. Pudewa and IEW having such a wonderfully good impact on my life and my family's life. And I would challenge all of you to really remember that what you do matters. How you impact other people matters. I think too often we believe we have to have thousands of followers on Instagram or, I don't know, a lot of friends to have a good impact on the world and to do something big. It really isn't like that at all. It starts at home. It starts with your friends. It starts with your family. It starts with the people closest to you. The way you interact with them, the way you use your times and talents and efforts to, in a God-glorifying way, in the way that He has called you to, it has an impact. And watching it grow and watching people's lives change because of it makes it worthwhile. So my challenge from this episode is just to make a good impact on the people around you, because you have no idea where that will take you or what that will lead to. So that is the extent of my little takeaway from this episode. And I also want to mention that I had linked University Ready Writing and IEW's website in the show notes. So if you're interested in learning any more about the curriculum, specifically what IEW offers high schoolers, please do check out the links. I also linked all of Mr. Pudewa's social media accounts, that is Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, and they are all linked in the show notes. I highly encourage you to go follow him because he shares weekly advice on homeschooling and also wellness, which has had a huge impact on my family and our own wellness journey. So I highly recommend you do that and listen to more of Mr. Pudewa's wisdom. And you can also do that by coming back next Friday to hear part 2. I hope to see you guys then. But until then, continue to stay fearlessly different.